Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Atlantic Council Conversations here at the IMF World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C. Thank you all for watching us today. I'm Racha Helwa, Director of the empowerMe initiative at the Atlantic Council, and I'm honored to be here with my esteemed guest, His Excellency Dr. Hassan El Khatib, Egypt's Minister of Investment and Trade. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Racha.
Thank you for being here with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd like to start by thinking about FDI and what, in your opinion, could be done to unlock the potential of FDI in Egypt.
Look, I think Egypt is in transition, and that transition is about making sure that after 10 years where the government have led the economic development, is that we get the private sector to invest and to attract FDI. This new government mandate is really clearly about this. Our job is to make sure that we create the business environment that is open for business, that is conducive for the private sector to operate and lead the economic development. We have clearly set out a target for the private sector share of investments to be 75% by the year 2030. For the private sector, for FDI, I think we acknowledge that we need very simple things, but very difficult to achieve, as you can imagine. The private sector investors would like clarity, would like policies that are clear, predictable, transparent. And that's exactly what we're trying to deliver. The focus will be clarity on the monetary policy, which has changed with the board and the leadership at the Central Bank of Egypt. Second is the fiscal policy and the easing and making sure that we have clear fiscal effective tax rate, for example, opening a new page with investors and taxpayers, with the tax authority, creating an environment for the SMEs to operate. All of these measures have already been announced by the Minister of Finance, one of the key members of the economic team and one of my colleagues in this journey. A third is a trade policy, for example. We need to make sure what is a trade for Egypt would look like. To answer that, it's simply want to have a trade policy that is open, that makes sure that the goods would move in and out at the least amount of time and cost. Fourth, we need to talk about the policy, the role of the state. We need to talk about a policy, energy policy, and how to bring the private sector. So at least with these 4 or 5 policies, that's our focus. We want to make sure that we have a competitive landscape for the private sector to operate and for Egypt to be attractive destination for FDI to come. What we're looking for is not a 10% increase on FDI or increase investment. We're talking about doubling or tripling. These are massive strides that we want to get. And without the structural reform, without these clarity and predictable policies, I think it would be lacking. And that's exactly the focus that we're trying to focus on.
Thank you so much. I think you actually touched upon multiple important areas, including fiscal policy reform, but also trade policy reform. And it's been quite known in the history of Egypt's trade policy that non-tariff barriers have been a real impediment for both exports and imports. So how do you plan to tackle non-trade barriers in particular?
As I said, trade is about the ease of getting goods in and out at the least amount of time and cost. And we have a long way to go. The way I approach reform and this transformation is through stages. And we've already identified certain areas where I would like to immediately, I'm not talking me, I mean, a couple of weeks I will present a plan to the cabinet in terms of what I want to do. I want to cut the time that is taking to release goods and services by literally 30 to 50%. And we have clearly identified certain measures to do in doing so. That's stage 1. Stage 2, we also know what are the measures to take that another 30 to 40%. And again, I'm not talking about the medium term. I'm talking about in the next few months.
Are you thinking of specific sectors under the services industry?
No, I think it's not the sector specific. It's all about the whole process and the entities that are party to the clearance of goods and services at the border. And this is part of, again, the transformation that needs to take place. It's the efficiency. It's the standards. It's changing the mindset. our ranking in trade is not good, and we need to improve this fast. And we know that one of the tools will be digitization, using the most advanced technology that is literally applied everywhere in the world today, but it will take time. So we're doing this in stages. I see this transformation hopefully by the end of next year, but we cannot wait up until we have these systems. I think we need to start, and that transition is also important because it's a culture change. We've been accustomed and used to our processes, not only for a year or two, but literally for decades. And that's a major transformation. And that, as you cut the number of days, you cut the cost.
Yeah, of course.
And the cost is massive because actually most of the companies that import or export pay in dollars. So actually you save foreign currency, and ultimately who pays for all of these inefficiencies is actually the ultimate consumer. So if we tackle all of this, we actually reduce inflation, which is the ultimate objective of the monetary policy, the new doctrine that we applied already.
That's an excellent point. And since you also spoke about ranking, I know that Egypt ranks relatively modestly in terms of business climate and global competitiveness. For example, in the latest Doing Business report of the World Bank, before it was discontinued, Egypt ranked 114 out of 190 countries. Can you spot particular areas that maybe are challenging the system more than others?
So look, competitiveness is at the heart of what we want to achieve. And I know the last Doing report was, I think, 2021. I've looked at the numbers very carefully. I think they are reinstating the report with a different name. I think Egypt is not coming into phase one, but we're coming in phase two. We're preparing for that, and we're looking at the different tracks of the report. Along sectors, along segments. So again, doing business is again the time that takes you to get an approval and a permit, and again multiple stages. So we're dividing the challenge, and we're putting teams specific to handle and to manage these processes. Things are started to work, at least on the approval side, in terms of the permitting. Again, one of the entities that report to the ministry is the General Authority for Investments. I'm putting very clear tracks and targets in terms of how to reduce the amount of time and effort and cost for companies that are being established and applying for services. We're also, again, advancing our automation and digitization in terms of the procedures. We want to have less in physical interaction, but rather on the software you apply. You want to get an approval for your General Assembly, you just put it on the system and it approves it automatically. And many of those steps are added to the system. I think we have already almost more than 20 services are in the system that you can do them online, but we still have others to be put on the system. It's a transformation. It started prior to me taking the job, but I think I want to continue with this, and I think this is the future. The less we get this interaction, I think the better for the businesses in Egypt.
And the more you can save in terms of public resources as well.
Of course.
So now talking about, you also mentioned fiscal policy and tax reform, which has been the focus of this new government since the start. What are the key highlights of tax reform that you think are going to create a major change in the life of investors?
I think it's twofold. The Minister of Finance have announced, in my view, a transformative, major reform. It's a new page that he put forward where it creates a new chapter between the taxpayer and the tax authority. We had a backlog of unaudited financials for thousands of firms. He's putting all of this into literally, he's trying to close that backlog. In addition to that, he's putting a lot of framework for easing the application and submission of your tax report, putting a limit to the penalties that used to agonize firms. As I said, it's a new page. The second and big component of his reform package is actually that he put forward a complete tax regime for the SMEs, which are massive for the Egyptian economy and a driver for the Egyptian economy. It's all, the vision here is to make sure it's easier, It's about forgiveness for the past, just opening a new page, simple rate for the SMEs, simple processes. It's all about inclusion. We want to make sure that the gray economy is, again, bundled into the main economy, and I think that's very important. That's on the reforms that he announced. Together with the Minister of Finance, I'm working with him on the levies, not taxes, but the fees and burdens that are levied across the system. 2 weeks ago, we presented together two reform packages for two taxes. One is the training tax, which was 1% of net profit, with a retroactive application for almost 16, 17 years. I think we've reached a conclusion there where, one, we will cut the tax dramatically, and second, we'll have also a way to forgive that retroactive nature because it's created a lot of issues. The second tax is actually the universal healthcare tax, which was a tax on revenue, not profits. And we have not reached the number yet, but on principle, we decided that no tax should be levied on revenue, but tax should be from the net profit. And that's agreed. Now we need to figure out what percentage to be put in that. So it's a stage one, because we agree that the reform will take stages. So that's the immediate stage. Second, we're taking a new batch of these levies and fees that are imposed in the system, and onward we will tackle that one step at a time.
That's quite refreshing to hear. Now moving to discussions about privatization, and I know a lot of foreign investors would like to know more about the government's plan on privatization. In the past decade or so, the privatization portfolio has been steady, and over the coming years or months, do you see this changing anytime soon? And if so, which sectors do you think are the most strategic for public asset restructuring?
So on a general term, we're committed to the privatization program. I think the timing and the way to do it is something that we want to study. My career has been in investments, so the last thing I want to do as an investor by training is to be forced to sell at a time where it's not ideal. I think the narrative also need to change in terms of these are government or the country's assets. So I'd rather focus on managing those assets properly, making sure that we utilize those assets and make sure these companies are run by private sector, attributing to a better economy, making sure that once we have these successful companies, we list them, sell them if need be, but also we need to think, why not create a fund for future generation? As long as we have the proper governance, proper management running those, and with partnership with the private sector. So the narrative, in my view, needs to change. Rather than being fixated on selling a few assets and just trying to create this overhang, I'd rather think of how these are assets of the Egyptians or future generation, and how can we get the private sector and we have a stake on those, and we partner with the private sector, be it on the management side or on the equity side. So I would want to change the whole narrative, but we're committed to the program because, as you can imagine, there is also some needs to reduce the debt, and this is part of the program as well.
And also on the investment side, the recent $35 billion Emirati investment in Ras Al Hikma has sparked optimism as well as concerns regarding the ownership structure of the deal and how this is going to proceed further. Could you provide more details about this significant investment?
Personally, I don't see any issue with the deal. I think it's a transformative deal. It will create, I think it's a first of its kind, but it will open the door for many of those. Why I say it's transformative? Because one, that investment will create a destination that, in my view, will be the destination on the Mediterranean. This is massive. The amount of investments to create that city, I would call it a smaller Dubai on the Mediterranean, it will be north of $100 billion. And that's the type of private-public partnership. I see this as a partnership between Egypt and the development side on the UAE side, which is massive. They have the expertise, they have the technology, they have the know-how, and of course, we need to also be part of that, and that's part of the deal. You know, why I say transformative? Because we have an untapped potential in the North Coast that we only Egyptian would know of, but we've never managed to create a destination on our own. And that's the beauty about this destination. This destination is actually being manifested after one development, which is developed also by the Emiratis, by Amar, which created the destination. Just for you, I don't know, you probably know that last summer, we attracted more than 100 nationalities to visit the North Coast. From zero, a couple of years back, 100 nationalities. The message I get from my Saudi friends, from other friends, oh my God, how come we never heard of these beaches on the North Coast, and the quality, the weather? This is fascinating. It's huge. And having this magnitude of a city in Ras Al Hikma will transform. I think we can replicate that in the North Coast, on the Red Sea, but that's a huge potential. I actually see positives across. I don't see any issue there, to be honest.
In terms of ownership structure, what is the portfolio of the public sector versus the private sector in this big investment?
What do you mean public sector?
The government, basically.
I think we have a stake. I don't remember the exact percentages, but the majority is
private sector.
The majority is with the UAE side, but we have a stake. So we have not sold 100%. We still have a stake, and we will benefit out of the development. Egyptian contractors, employees, workers. It's a major development. I mean, $100 billion will be put in one project. It's a massive development for Egypt.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now looking back, and for you, before taking on this important public service position and mission, you had a long career in financial services and asset management. So as a financial expert, what is the key takeaway from your experience that you've carried with you into public service and would like to implement?
I know investments very well. I know what investors would be looking for, and that's what I'm focused, along with the team, the economic team. It's about policies, it's about transparency, it's about predictability. Investors would want to come to a market and will ask, what is the effective tax rate? And that's what I want to answer. Not for now, but for the next 20 years. Investors would want to come, how long does it take to clear my goods at the border and at what cost? Because they want to build their feasibility study based on, okay, I want to put my operation in Egypt as a hub for exports. I want stable policies, I want predictable policies, I want to make sure that this location is competitive now and for the next 20 years. And that's what we're going to try to address. I think Egypt has a major advantage, a great opportunity to tap in today, especially with the supply chain shift, with the onshoring, with our abundance of actually quality labor, very, very talented engineering force. Our location is second to none, compounded with very good infrastructure that has been implemented for the past 10 years, trade agreements that are actually very preferential, that give access to more than 70 countries. And finally, our untapped major wealth in renewable energy and green potential. So compounding all of these, I think we have a very good opportunity to tap in.
And these are definitely significant opportunities. At the same time, in terms of risk, how do you perceive the pressing geopolitical conditions / political uncertainty in the region, and how does this influence investments in the country?
Of course, it's concerning. It's already affecting Egypt. So Suez Canal proceeds, which we assume it will be the most constant source of foreign currency, is affected almost by 50–60%. But look, I think I'm seeing investors the last weeks, month, a couple of months at least, they see Egypt from a different perspective. Despite the regional conflicts on our east, west, and south, they see Egypt as the only country that is actually stable, very clear foreign policy that is navigating all of those challenges in a very stable, principled approach. I hear that from the US, I hear it from the European side. Egypt is the only party who's sitting on the table trying to find a peace agreement across the three conflicts. Is really there with a principled approach to those. It makes me proud. And investors are actually getting comfort that Egypt has been navigating these challenges in a very smooth way, in this clear approach. And they are seeing the opportunity that, okay, I will come invest in a country that the political and the foreign policy is stable and actually very, very positive. And I see Japanese companies, Turkish companies, European companies, American companies expanding their businesses in the last few weeks. Let alone if we continue with the reform agenda, I see that we will definitely be a destination for many companies to come and use Egypt as a hub.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We definitely wish you and Egypt the best of luck on this very important mission. We thank you very much for being
Thank you,
with us
Rasha.
today. And I thank everyone for tuning in today as well, and see you next time.
Thank you, Rasha.
Thank
Very
you.
much.